The sun beat down harshly on the Texas plains, painting the dry grasses in gold and casting long shadows from every twisted mesquite tree. Clara McCall wiped the sweat from her brow as she guided her mare, Juniper, along a narrow creek bed. The summer heat buzzed around her, cicadas droning, dust clinging to her boots. She had ridden out to check the far fence line after last night's storm, but what she found instead was far stranger. A low, muffled sound made her rein in her horse. Help. At first she thought it was an animal. But then she saw it, just beyond the reeds, in a soft patch of earth near the edge of the creek, a figure was struggling. A man, arms and shoulders still above ground, but the rest of him already swallowed by the pit of quicksand. He was motionless except for his hands, which clawed weakly at the air. One long braid of hair, matted with mud, lay against his back. His face was sunburned, smeared with dirt, and unmistakably Comanche. Clara froze. Every warning she'd ever heard about hostile Indians flashed in her mind. Her father's stories, the neighbors' scars, the militia's endless talk. But this man didn't look like a threat now, he looked like he was dying. His breathing was shallow, his lips cracked. Their eyes met. Even as his body sank inch by inch, there was no fear in his expression, only pride, and a strange calm acceptance. He would rather die than beg. But the flicker of something, surprise, hope, crossed his face when she didn't run. Clara slid from the saddle. She uncoiled the rope from Juniper's saddle horn with quick, practiced hands. Her voice was calm, but loud enough to reach him. Don't move. The more you struggle, the faster it takes you. His eyes narrowed, watching her. She tied one end of the rope to her saddle horn, then stepped closer, boots sinking slightly in the wet soil. She tossed the free end toward him, missed. The man didn't flinch. She tossed again. This time, it landed across his chest. His arms moved slowly, grabbing the line with what strength he had left. Wrap it under your arms, she shouted. He did. She turned to Juniper and clicked her tongue. Hup. The mare leaned forward, hooves digging in as she pulled. The rope grew taut. The man groaned, a low, guttural sound of pain and effort. Clara held her breath. Inch by inch, he came free, a wet, sucking sound as the pit tried to keep him. Then finally, he slid out like a man reborn, collapsing in the grass. Clara rushed forward, knife drawn, not to hurt him, but to cut away the mud-crusted rope from his chest. He lay still, breathing raggedly. His dark eyes flicked toward her. Why? He rasped. She didn't know how to answer. She looked down at her dirt-stained hands, then back at him. Because no one deserves to die like that. He stared at her for a moment longer, unreadable. Then, without another word, he rolled to his knees, staggered to his feet, and limped into the brush, leaving a trail of wet footprints in the dust. Clara stood alone in the silence, her heart pounding. The rope lay coiled in the dirt, the only sign he'd ever been there. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The walls of the small ranch house creaked in the wind, and every sound outside, every coyote's yip or distant hoofbeat, set her nerves on edge. She lay in bed, eyes fixed on the wooden beams above, replaying the day in her mind. The Comanche warrior's face, his voice, the way he had vanished without so much as a name. What if he came back? What if others followed? She'd told no one, not her father, not the hired hand, not the neighbor who had stopped by before dusk with a load of feed. In this country, saving a Comanche was no small thing. It could be seen as treason by some, and a death wish by others. Morning came, red and restless. Clouds gathered low in the sky, hinting at more storms. Clara saddled Juniper and rode out early to finish checking the fence line, but she found herself glancing often toward the north, where the man had disappeared. There were hoofprints in the dried mud, his tracks. Deep and uneven. He'd been limping, no doubt about that, but they didn't go far. Just beyond the rise, they vanished into harder ground and scattered rock. He hadn't left in a straight line. He'd circled back, maybe even watched her. Later that afternoon, her father rode in from town with dust on his coat and a furrow in his brow. He dismounted stiffly and unslung his rifle from the saddle, habit born of tension. Trouble, he said without preamble. Riders spotted northeast of here. Comanche, maybe a dozen. Sheriff's calling it a scouting party. Could be more coming. Clara's stomach dropped. She kept her expression neutral, busying herself with the reins. Did they attack anyone? She asked. Not yet, he said. But folks are nervous. Marshall's getting a militia together. Said we ought to be ready. She nodded. We always are. Her father looked at her a moment longer, squinting. You all right, girl? You look a little pale. Didn't sleep much, she lied. He grunted. Well, don't let your guard down. Indians this close means something's coming. As he went inside, Clara remained on the porch. She sat down slowly, eyes scanning the horizon. She felt the weight of what she'd done pressing on her chest like a stone. It had been the right thing, she still believed that, but now, doubt crawled in like cold wind under a door. She'd pulled a man from death. But what if, in doing so, she'd invited it to her doorstep? She stared toward the north again, where the sky had turned the color of steel. The third day dawned quiet, too quiet. The wind had stilled, and the usual morning chorus of birdsong was oddly absent. Clara noticed it the moment she stepped outside with a bucket of feed. Even the chickens were subdued, pacing the yard in uneasy circles as if they too sensed something pressing in from the edges of the land. By mid-morning, Her father had taken the rifle out to the barn, muttering about reinforcing the doors. Clara helped with the chores, but her hands trembled when they weren't busy. Every noise made her flinch. The far-off sound of hooves, was it just a deer? Or was it something else? Then, just before sunset, it happened. The first rumble came low, like distant thunder. Then again, louder. Clara froze, still holding the bridle of a young colt in the corral. The ground trembled under her boots. She looked westward, toward the open prairie. Dust was rising in the distance. Not a single rider, not a small party, a wave. Clara's breath caught as she counted the silhouettes cresting the hill. 10, 20, 30, maybe more. Riders fanned out across the plain, forming a wide arc. The setting sun painted them in bronze and shadow, their horses kicking up trails of dust as they moved in perfect silence. The lead figure rode straight and tall, bare-chested beneath a bone and bead necklace, his long black hair catching the wind. Her heart knew him before her eyes did. It was him, the man from the Quicksand. He rode with purpose, calm and controlled, as if this moment had already happened in his mind and he was simply arriving in it. Behind him came others, warriors on horseback, older men, boys, women riding with babies slung across their backs. The entire tribe. Clara's father stormed out of the barn, rifle in hand. "Get inside," he shouted, his voice sharp. "Get inside now." "No," Clara said, barely above a whisper. He turned to her, furious. "What the hell do you mean, no?" She stepped forward, placing herself between him and the approaching riders. "I know him," she said. "I saved him." The words were like thunder in the silence. Her father stared at her, stunned, as the Comanche leader dismounted just yards away. The other riders held back, forming a wide circle, weapons sheathed. The man approached slowly, carefully. He stood tall, though the bruises from the quicksand had not fully faded. His eyes were steady, focused on Clara alone. He brought a hand to his chest and bowed his head. "My name is Tahu," he said in halting English. "You pulled me from death. I return with life." Behind him, a dozen warriors dismounted and spread out, scanning the horizon, not threatening, but watchful. "Why are you here?" her father asked, gripping his rifle tightly. Tahu's gaze flicked toward the weapon, then back to Clara. "Your daughter saved me," he said. "Now, we protect her. Until danger is gone." Clara could hardly believe what she was hearing. Her knees felt weak, but she stood tall. "You don't owe me anything," she said, voice shaking. "I didn't save you for this." Tahu tilted his head. "You gave mercy with no debt. We give peace with no price." Then he turned and raised a hand. The entire line of mounted Comanche riders lifted their hands in the same silent gesture, palms open, empty. A show of peace. The evening sun burned red behind them, casting long shadows on the ground. For a moment, no one moved. And then, slowly, Clara's father lowered his rifle. The days that followed felt like waking up in a different world. Where there had once been silence and suspicion, now there were voices, careful, cautious voices, trying to build bridges across years of mistrust. The McCall Ranch, once just a lonely patch of land tucked between the scrub hills and dry riverbeds, had become something unexpected, a meeting place. A neutral ground, and at the center of it stood Clara and Tahu, bound by a single moment that neither of them could forget. The Comanche did not camp close, but they did not go far. They set up their lodges beyond the western ridge, close enough to see the ranch house but far enough to respect the space. Each morning, some of the warriors would appear near the property lines, not with weapons, but as sentries. Watchers, guardians. Clara's father remained wary. He kept his rifle close and his words few, but even he could not ignore what was happening. No raids, no theft, no violence, just quiet eyes and steady presence. And when, 2 nights later, a group of settlers rode out to confront the Indian situation, it was Tahu himself who met them on the open field, unarmed, flanked by his elders. Clara stood beside him. She spoke first. "He's not here for war," she said, her voice carrying in the still air. "He's here because I saved him, and he believes in repaying a debt with peace." There was scoffing, disbelief, but there was no gunfire. Not that night. Afterward, one of the ranchers approached Clara privately. He was older, grizzled from years of hard riding. "You sure you know what you're doing, girl?" he asked. She had looked at him and answered simply, "Do you?" Word spread. Some scoffed, some watched from afar, and a few, just a few, came to see for themselves. A trader, brave or foolish, approached the Comanche camp with goods. He returned unharmed and richer than when he arrived. A widow from a nearby farm came to ask for help repairing a broken axle. 3 warriors followed her home and fixed it before nightfall. Each act chipped away at the wall that had stood between 2 worlds. One evening, Clara and Tahu stood by the creek again. The place where it had all begun was dry now, the quicksand pit hardened into cracked earth. The moon hung above them, casting silver light across the landscape. Crickets sang. The wind had finally returned. Tahu looked out across the plain, then turned to her. "This land," he said, "was always blood and bone. You gave it breath." She didn't know what to say to that. She bent down, picked up a small stone from the dried creek bed, and rolled it in her fingers. "I wasn't trying to start anything," she said quietly. "I just couldn't let you die. And I cannot let you stand alone," he replied. Their eyes met in the moonlight. There was no romance in it, not yet, just understanding. A bond forged not in desire, but in shared defiance of what the world expected them to be. You know, she said, smiling faintly, people are never going to believe this happened. Good, Tahu said, let them dream of peace. Dreams become fire. Fire becomes change. From that night on, the McCall Ranch was no longer just a patch of land. It was the first spark, and though the world would fight to stamp it out, for a time, that flame burned, quiet and bright, between two people who had once been strangers, and a land that had never known stillness.